I want to see protests here for the entire event. Don't give these corrupt charlatans a minute's peace.
When I say sorry, you stay out. Tory out. Tory out.
Standing up for themselves, following the biggest.
Mate, do you know Turning Point? The organisation is very fucked up. Why? Very fucked up.
So's your organisation, whatever that is.
Organisation I'm part of, so I don't want them to know.
Yeah, why do you lie and you cheat or you do crime? No, you don't, so why hide your face?
I've never forgotten a lady in Newcastle saying to me, I asked her why she'd come to an event we were at because she didn't seem particularly a Labour person, and she said, well, I heard you were evil.
Are you saying police officer? I'd like to know why you're defending the force and like the softness and racism. What are you doing with the police? Should be given to you just holding them up. Why are you doing all that?
I can't told you, but I've got an event against it. I believe in freedom of speech and freedom of protest. It's a historic right in this country. But also there's a freedom to get to one's events and appointments.
A big welcome to everybody here today. Thank you for coming, and thank you to all the volunteers as well that have been helping us this morning. It's been an amazing effort. So obviously we're here because we've got the Tories in Manchester. You know, why are the Tories in Manchester? It was just unbelievable. So what we want to do is give them an absolutely massive unwelcome when they're here. I can see a few rude gestures going on there now. Today, in the next 3 days, is going to be a big, huge festival of resistance. Obviously, we've got the national demonstration tomorrow, so hopefully all of you are going to come to that. So we're going to really oppose the Tories at every step of the way that they're here, but it's actually going to be a celebration as well. We've got some really fantastic speakers. Today we've got some wonderful performers who are joining us, who are giving us some performance poetry. I'm just going to do a little disclaimer that some of the poetry is adults. Maybe if you've got children, just cover their ears. The theme of all the things that are happening is united against the Tories. You know, so it's a big coming together of all the, our movement, all the unions, all the campaigns, all the activists, all coming together to really show the Tories that we're strong, that we're united, and we oppose them every step of the way, and we're really going to build a movement.
I know we do great work in the charity sector and all the rest of it, but I just wish we didn't need it. It's called Children in Need. Children in need, children in need. The system is built upon corporate greed, where rich men put trademarks on plants in their seed, but a baby can die for the want of a feed, or a cheap magic drug in a handful of rice where they bottle the rainfall and slap on a price, and beggar thy neighbours the only advice, where for one to succeed a million must fail, and shore up a system where tyrants prevail. But just now and then, if the cameras are on, they put on a show with a dance and a song. Pop stars and celebrities queue at the doors to lend their support to this wonderful cause. It's children in need, man. Children in need. Dress up like a dick and forget all the greed. The stars all come out and we fill up their tins. They're so glad they're not cursed with original sin. The tears in their eyes and concern on their faces. So grateful that they were born in the right places. These non-doms with fortune stashed far, far away can get to be heroes, but just for one day. I'm not down on charity. It counts for a lot. I just hate the disparity between have and have not. While we get our head shaved or run 20 miles, some celebs seem to do it just to raise their profile. Media exposure is the name of their game, so we get on the telly and massage their fame. But we who have nothing, we all give the most. From city to village, from mountain to coastal, when we all pull together and all lend a hand, there's no end to what we could do in this land. But you mean and you mighty, it's time to confess that you'll bend any rule just to help you pay less. So pass me that bucket. I need to be sick, but spare us the guilt trip, you tax-dodging pricks. Thanks.
I think it's 9 years ago now since the riots, the so-called Scally riots, and then I wrote this on the day after in just disgust at how the media were representing these poor, these underprivileged kids, and not just kids, it wasn't just kids, it wasn't just teenagers. It was adults as well, you just didn't hear that bit about it. So I was just appalled, and I'm always appalled by the media, but I'm from a scally background. I could have been in that, but I never. My brothers could have been that, but they weren't. So this is about that. And I also think Scally is right, because I am from there. They do have a kind of second sight, a gift. They knew something was coming, so they just fucking kicked off, didn't they? So this is about that, and it's called How Do You Respect Fuck All? Let me tell you what fuck all is. It's invisible, nada. It's you don't exist or matter. That's what fuck all is. It's Theresa May, plastic face spouting nothing tangible. That's fuck all. Fuck all is the offer on the table. It's the option of government. Fuck all is the big society. That's fuck all. Fuck all would spit in your eye. If it recognised your eye, if it recognised your humanity, fuck all pisses all over the crap of you. That's fuck all. Fuck all is the BBC bullying Darkest How. It's a newsreader calling him a rioter. Mainstream news. Now that's fuck all. Fuck all ignores the question, it hides in denial. Fuck all loves us blaming. That's fuck all. Fuck all takes your jobs, your libraries, your hospitals, your pubs, bulldozers, your youth clubs, labels you lazy and nothing. That's fuck all. Fuck all destroys more than we burn. It's the politics of the rich and evil. And yes, I said evil. A tramp dies of cold in the shadow of an empty home. That's fuck all. That's evil. People are fuck all. Poor people are fuck all. Angry people are fuck all. Addicts are fuck all. Students are fuck all. The unemployed are fuck all. The dispossessed are fuck all. The unemployable are fuck all. Single mothers are fuck all. The unlovable are fuck all. The mentally ill are fuck all. The abused are fuck all. The fucked are fuck all. Fuck all will burn down your capital. Now that's fuck all. Thank you very much, everybody.
It's great to be here for the launch of this festival of resistance against those fucking Tories who are back in Manchester. And what do we do about a problem called the Tories? We protest, and we protest, and we carry on protesting until we kick them out of Manchester and we kick them out of power. Because this weekend is the eve of the Tories cutting £20 a week off universal credit that is going to plunge 300,000 more people and children into poverty. These are the Tories that are letting us die because of COVID. There's still up to 700 people a week dying because the fucking Tories are bored of saving lives now. They've given millions to their friends through dodgy PPE and now they're going to let us die. It's because the Tories have killed at least 100,000 people through a decade of austerity, and that is why we will not stop until they are out of power.
Maintaining a nomadic lifestyle is vital to a number of ethnic groups throughout the world. Irish travellers, Romani gypsies, like me, have a long and proud history in Britain. Our communities have brought entertainment, offered mobile, cheap and versatile labour, and helped build the UK's extensive canal systems. We've constructed Britain's roads, we've worked in the factories that fuelled the Industrial Revolution, and historically were the backbone of the agricultural economy, working as seasonal farm labourers. Grandfathers served in the First and Second World War. We've been an integral part of building up this country and historically have an unknown history of expulsions, deportations and slavery, and even the death penalty in this country as a punishment simply for being a habitual gypsy. Throughout the ages there's been attempts by the state to extinguish our nomadic way of life, which is today just hanging on by a thread. This government's police crime sentencing and courts bill is further set to erode our customs and to subject us to disproportionate policing. For me, this is a fascist ideology.
I never considered myself a bad person, and I definitely did not see myself as a criminal. Yet this police crime and courts and sentencing bill intends to make trespass a criminal offence, thus effectively criminalising me and jeopardising my right to live a nomadic life. Bizarrely enough, Here in Manchester, at the Tory party conference, I'm not actually trespassing. For Drive to Survive was able to negotiate with the council and the police a place for us to stop. A piece of disused waste concrete in the centre of town. And we've been authorised access for a specific number of vehicles and have agreed to leave in 6 days' time. Thus my home is safe and we do not need to trespass, and I can relax with my family and friends who are here with me. So how difficult was that? I mean, really, it wasn't difficult at all. And so my question to the Tory party and any of the Lords, if you're listening, is why is this bit of the bill needed? And why are we constantly forced to trespass when there is adequate land for all? It just needs to be freed and shared. As I travel around the country, I see bits of industrial wasteland slowly being reclaimed by nature, while the owner waits for an opportunity to develop their land and watch their investment skyrocket. At the same time, thousands of travellers live roadside in vulnerable, dangerous situations with little privacy, often on top of the settled community, and this can be the cause of upset between the settled and nomadic population, which of course the Tory councils love to exploit. Often there will be a piece of privately owned abandoned land around the corner, and this makes no sense. Why is it that the Tory government is planning to confiscate our homes, fine us lots of money, and even imprison us for living somewhere that is unused, when there are so many alternative spaces that could be opened up for us, as Manchester Council has demonstrated this week?
They talk about policy as if it's just some little document that gets filed away into a file, but actually it's personal because it's an attack on our lives. We've heard today about the impacts of the Police Crime and Sentencing Courts Bill on trespass and the eviction of people from sites. We've heard about how they're going to take people's homes away. But when you look at the bill, it attacks the Gypsy, Roma, Traveller community, all marginalised community members across the board. They are going to criminalise us. They are going to stop and search us. They are going to increase the policing powers. Here in Manchester, we've literally just been given a coloniser as the head of the GMP. Now, I understand that there have been arrangements made with the GMP, but that is some scary, scary business. This is a police force that have come out with a report themselves to tell us they are institutionally racist. They've printed the words out on paper, they've distributed it, and now they are being given increased policing powers to come and attack us, take us out of our own homes, and criminalise us.
The Conservative government's Brexit is not working. The vast majority of people know this. The government has lost us £1.5 billion on Horizon 2020 funding alone. And it's this government that says that they champion science and want to attract the best and the brightest. This government, which has also failed to sign up to the Erasmus programme, which shows that they don't care about bringing in the best and the brightest. This is not just limited to Brexit per se. The Conservatives have also cut the overseas development aid budget and the MHRA budget. This all goes to show that this government is certainly not pro-science. Now, AI wrote that. I've got access to the beta development of OpenAI, and I said, turn this into a speech, please, and I just chucked in my jumbled notes, and this is what it produced. This is the future. It's amazing. But interesting thing is, in my notes, I never mentioned the Conservatives. I never mentioned the Tories. This AI, it knows stuff. It mentioned them like 3 times over. Machine learning, machine angry.
We've got a massive political problem. Our entire system is flawed, and it has led us to where we are today. There's not enough of us out there. There needs to be more. You know, this government, we all know they're corrupt. They don't need to be convicted. We know it. They're liars, they're cheats, they're charlatans, and they are destroying our lives and the United Kingdom. First past the post has failed. In the 21st century, there is no place for it. Only Belarus and the United Kingdom use it. It's flawed. We need proportional representation. Before that, we need politics Politicians we can believe in, we can trust. Politicians with honour, integrity and dignity. They're not out there. Where are they? We know the Tories are coming. I couldn't even get the car park I normally stay in. They're that secure conscious now. They know what they're up against. And I hope there's going to be a lot more groups here, a lot more people. I want to see protests here for the entire event. Don't give these corrupt charlatans a minute's peace. They've taken away our security. They've destroyed millions of people's lives. And for what? Brexit. And where has it led us? Down a path where we're heading into a fascist country. A UKIP Conservative mix taking Britain down the road of fascism. Priti Patel, she'd have been a great Stasi officer. At the end of the day, it is down to each and every one of us to make that difference. Without you, there is no change. Bollocks to Brexit and bollocks to the Tories!
Bollocks to the Tories! Bollocks to Brexit! Bollocks to Brexit!
Bollocks to Brexit!
Bollocks to Brexit!
Bollocks to Brexit!
We've got a position now where Liverpool City Council is actually fighting a citizen of Liverpool, a guy called Mark Jackson, who has put his name to litigation against the council, telling them to cancel the arms fair. So we've got the position now where Liverpool Council is actually fighting for the right to put on the arms fair against one of its own citizens. And I didn't ever think that in Liverpool we would find ourselves in a position like that. And let's face it, Liverpool City Council is a public body. This public body has to bind by public law. They even have to bound by their own policies. And in 2007, I mean, people from Stop the War here might remember, Liverpool played a fantastic role in disinvesting in the arms trade. We joined up with other organisations, and I think we were the first council in the country to agree unanimously to disinvest from the arms trade. And why is that relevant to this? It's because they also agreed to have an ethical policy. And guess what? That ethical policy should really prevent Liverpool City Council from allowing that building to be used in the way they want to use it today.
That is billions of pounds of wealth that could be going into reparations, could be going into global health justice, could be going into education from cradle to grave, could be going into fixing the climate emergency, could be going into, come on, tell me what could it be going into? Things that are wrong in your community, tell me. What does it need to go into? What does that money need to go into? Come on.
Windrush generation!
The Windrush, yes, come on, thank you. Anything else? What does it need to go into? The NHS, thank you. Yes, anything else?
Decolonising the curriculum.
Decolonisation, amen to that. This is what I'm saying. We in our communities know where this wealth should be spent. We know where we should be putting our energy and our communities' fund. This is what we need to do. And it's by keeping this vision of what the world could look like, how we need to use that fund, how we need to use what our community builds. It's by keeping that vision alive that we can build the grassroots mass movements that we need to push forward the anti-war movement.
At every level, what's going on at the moment is totally insufficient, whether you're talking national, international or local. The key to a successful COP is not just going to be powering past coal, it's going to have to be on the financing and the way in which we ensure that those G20 countries, the biggest polluters, are actually making sure the money is coming through to those countries, the developing countries, the small island developing states, to make sure that they actually have the resources to be able to transition themselves in a fair way. And of course, critically, what you have at COP that is always not discussed is to make sure that actually loss and damage is recognised. Loss and damage is not just adaptation, it's accepting that we in the global north have made sure that the rest of the world is suffering from the pollution that we have made over the past 2 centuries. And it's recognising that there are countries where it's not possible to adapt and mitigation is a minor element of what they can do. So yes, we should be paying for their mitigation, their adaptation, but we should also be addressing the issue of loss, which cannot be adapted against. And unfortunately, that's something which still has to make it onto the climate agenda.
In 2020, we did a pretty good job modelling what would happen if we all individually stayed at home and tried to do our best to lower our CO2 emissions. We, like I said, we stayed at home, we didn't really drive, there was hardly any flights, and it did work. We did lower our carbon emissions by 6.4%, but that's not enough. What we need, at the very least, is to be carbon neutral, and ideally we need to be carbon negative. So it's just like a bath, and it's filling up, and the plug's in, and we're almost at the brim and the tap's still on. We're going to turn it down a little bit. It's still going to overflow eventually. So what we need to do is turn the tap off completely and take the plug out. So at this crucial point where it really is make or break when it comes to the climate and ecological crisis, we need to stop thinking of small individual lifestyle changes, because that's not enough. We need corporations, we need government, we need policymakers and banks to make big changes. Now, you might be wondering why I'm mentioning banks, but banks actually play a key role in funding the climate crisis. The money we put in banks think it's just being kept safely. It's actually being invested in oil and gas industries and companies that are destroying our biodiversity. These banks are using our hard-earned money and investing it irresponsibly. They're investing it in these oil and gas industries and other programs that aren't sustainable. They will not last. The oil and gas industry is a sunset industry. It is a dying industry. Just look at what's happened in the past 2 weeks. The energy providers have gone bust. You know, it's scary, and it's worrying from a financial point of view because our money is tied up in dying industries, and it's worrying from an environmental point of view because they're investing money to destroy our planet. So this is why we need the banks to divest from fossil fuels and invest responsibly. Going back to corporations, I don't want to sound too pretentious, but I want to use a quote from Richard Price, but he said that the bigger the issue, the smaller you write. You pick the smallest, most manageable part of the big issue, and then you work off the residents. And this reminds me of what corporations are doing with greenwashing. What they're doing is putting out adverts, they're putting out statements, and they're saying, look at what we're doing for the planet. We're recycling more, we're planting 100 trees, we're carbon neutral, but what they're actually doing is lying to us. They're distracting us from the bigger issue. They're distracting us from the harm that they're actually causing the planet. Because yes, you might be planting 100 trees, but you've cut down 1,000 more. You might say that you're carbon neutral, but what you're actually doing is not reducing your carbon footprint, but paying for it to be offset overshore. We need to not take what they're saying at face value and think that they can do more, because they can do more, and we're demanding that they do more.
This is a song called Fed. Did I order a new prescription? Where's my diction still clear? Right here, I can sit up dreaming. That has got me believing I'm rational in my fear. Buy another red dress, buy some sets, buy a pool, buy some shoes, buy another tattoo, swing it in you. Like me more than I do, and I listen to everything, because to me it seems the pursuit of happiness is buying any magazine. It's the 7th time this week, at least I think I can carry them, but the scary and the only way I see. Swallow medication, swallow education, swallow fashion, swallow you, swallow the little you, so I can tell you the version of improved, and I misinterpreting, because to me it seems everybody's dying just to live a manufactured dream. It don't feel right, but they tell me it's in my head. Are they lying?
Every 2 years we come out in force, even though we're feeling knackered and shitty, to fight this blue virus invading our streets as jobbers and lanyards take over our city. Our collective voices cry, why here? We can't help feeling it's totally on purpose to rub our faces in blue, scummy mud. Boris the clown and his travelling circus profit from war and climate destruction, close our borders to those in need, cut UC and starve our children. Down with compassion, yeah to greed, smash the unions, fire and rehire. NHS, Silly, you know the drill. And how to sort out those pesky protesters? Give police more power with a shiny new bill. And every time they descend on us, we take to the streets as a city to shout. We stand for equality, peace, social justice. So trot on, do one. Tories out.
Who delivered your food and who took your trash? Who fixed your Mercedes and built your gap? Who was on the front line in these danger tracks? Instead of bigger wages, we're paid with claps. Now, am I supposed to fight when my hands are tied? Am I supposed to race when I start behind? Continuing the path to the class divide. Questioning the methods which your parents fed kids. Your children's breakfast never missed it. Yes, when stress is merited, when money you inherited, and never face the pressures which. And even when pandemics hit, we see these acts of selfishness. They pass the chance to send the gift of love to kids who tends to fit. The notion that they'll help the rich and then they leave us less equipped. Am I supposed to fight when my hands are tied? Am I supposed to race when I start behind? Continuing the path to the class divide. Am I supposed to fight when my hands are tied? Am I supposed to race when I start behind? Continuing the path to the class divide. Nice one.
I bring you greetings from the Palestine Solidarity Campaign. Other speakers have articulated the Tories' terrible policies that impact on the daily lives of the most vulnerable people here in Britain. But their terrible policies also impact on people's lives thousands of miles away, including the Palestinian people. I remind you that the Palestinian people's catastrophe, the Nakba, was made in Britain. It was made in 1917 when the land of the Palestinians was promised to the Zionist movement. The British government then had no right to promise Palestine to any other people. Britain, under a Tory government, continues the failure of successive British governments to stand with the Palestinian people in their pursuit of their legitimate, inalienable rights in their historic homeland. It continues its hundreds of millions worth of arms trade with Israel. It continues to allow Israeli weapons manufacturers like the terrible Elbit Systems to manufacture components in the UK. When that company boasts, and listen to this, that its weapons are field tested, that means that they use them against the Palestinians and then laud how successful they are in killing people. Free, free! Thank you so much.
Let me tell you what they didn't count for. They didn't count for all of us being here in unity and solidarity. They didn't know that black people would join forces with the Gypsy Roma and trouble a community and stand in solidarity against this wicked evil government. They didn't know. And let me tell you something. We can never, ever, ever, ever stop. Protesting is a human right. Do you agree? Protesting is a human right, and we cannot allow this racist, fascist government to take away our human rights to protest. Never, ever, ever. And let me tell you how we're going to do this. We're going to do it in unity. And we're going to do it in humanity. We can defeat this bill in humanity. And we're going to do it in solidarity. And when we stand together in solidarity and continue to march against this racist government, we will always win and we will always come out on top. Solidarity! Whose lives matter? Whose lives matter? I hope you're listening to that, Pretty Patel. We're not going anywhere. We'll be back. Solidarity, everybody.
The reality of what has happened and what is happening to fellow working class people is painful. Over a decade of austerity, and it is continuing. The systematic decimation of the social security system, the prolonged, deliberate and aggressive attack on workers' rights, the privatisation of our National Health Service, of our social care system, of our water, privatisation of our communities, endemic in work poverty and exploitation, and of course the capitalist destruction of our planet. And the government who assemble here in Manchester, the shameful, brutal government, they uphold and they cultivate all of that destruction. Shame on them. But I want to ask this question to everybody gathered here today. Why, when they have an 80-seat majority, why do they feel like they need to increase the power that the police have and further restrict our civil liberties through the police crime court and sentencing bill? Why do they do that? Do the police not have enough power? Do they not have enough power in their 80-seat majority? I think it's because they know that our discontent, our solidarity, our organising, our class consciousness is growing in opposition to this government.
Boris Johnson's a waste man. Boris Johnson's a waste man. When I say Tories, you say Tories! Tories! Tories, Tories, Tories!
Is it against the law to protest it? You're not asking the nice thing. The thing is, they can stand over there leaving the chair, more than off about the cross thing. But if I stand here and talk about gypsy and travel rights to white people, like I said, you're trying to move me all over there. Nah. I ain't taking no gas.
Right, we are not allowing protests to take place.
It isn't a protest.
That is designated.
What classifies protest? You don't have to.
Right, I've explained it a couple of times to you. That is a designated protest area. This is not. Okay, so we're allowing people to stand in there to protest. Right, and I've explained that to you.
Why do I have to be at it's like 2 steps away? What is the point of standing here? They can hand out
The problem is, right, if one person starts protesting here, if one person protests here, he encourages everybody else to do it. Now that's not fair. Right, now listen to me. Shout up for anybody else. Right, when I came over to speak to you and ask you nicely, you turned it into something else. Right. What do you mean it's a... Right, I've asked you nicely.
Yeah, can we move in there? Because you can protest me if you want over there. I'm telling you now, I am physically sending you because listen, but you give me this midnight and stay here.
You cannot take my side.
Now listen, how can I tell you?
You force people to do it all the time. You force people to do it. You're taking my side.
No, I'm saying
get off of me.
Put your side in there and you have your side.
You can't hold a banner.
You forced down to make it be standing there.
What's back there?
We find it funny to see our trauma and shit. Everyone gets their cameras out, all these people come over us, they're all gorgeous people, all the same.
Well, it's a case of you've got that right there.
Fuck off from the cameras.
Okay? So I'm Iraqi. I want to ask you, you supported Tory Blair on second referendum on people's vote. You support Tory Blair? You supported Tory Blair on second referendum. You know I just want to ask you, you supported people's vote on Tory Blair, who destroyed my country to build democracy, but he doesn't want to do it at home. So why you don't want to do democracy at home?
Excuse me, am I here supporting Tony Blair? I don't think so.
You support second referendum, which is
Look, you assume what you like, mate. I don't support Tony Blair.
Okay, that's excellent.
Anyway, how you doing?
I'm great.
Oh, yeah. We got, look. Hang on a minute. Are you bringing Tony?
I don't know.
Yeah. We don't like these.
Tony Blair is paying for you anyway.
Sorry?
So how's that? Tony Blair is paying for you.
Who has? Tony Blair? So who told you that?
Well, I have.
Come off it. Yes. You read fake news, mate.
Really?
Yes.
I think you are the fake news here.
Right, off you go then. Who is real news?
I think it's GBU.
Now we know you're a plant spy.
Well, I told you I'm not a British. I did not vote for a Brexit.
Who's paying you?
Well, no one. I'm paying myself.
Right.
Who's paying you, Steve? Who's paying your taxes as well?
Math guys, who pays you guys?
Anyway,
I'm paid by supporters. So I'm paid by the work I do for my platform. I don't receive any funding from any donors. We are
Your party's full of
Please stop child abuse. Oh no, I've spoken at rallies which are say again. I've spoken at rallies which have allowed
You're a Tory.
Yeah! Look at this guy, he's saving the fucking world.
Look,
I saw you.
What are you doing?
Just need to see. Well, you will second referendum, which is not a democracy, because first you need to implement the Brexit and then do it. So do whatever referendum you want.
You said I support Tony Blair.
Yes.
Well, I don't.
No, you did.
You're spreading fake news.
No,
so let's not just nail on the head. Show me the evidence that I support Tony Blair.
In 2019, on Sky News, with Sam Court, you supported People's Vote of Tony Blair as well.
I support People's Vote for the European Union. Doesn't mean I support Tony Blair. It's like saying,
on the Telegraph they said that you take money from Tony Blair, so you are part of his group or you are part of his campaign.
You like GB News, you said, yeah?
Yes.
That says it all.
He's Turning Point. This guy's Turning Point.
I own Turning Point.
He owns Turning Point.
What a cunt! Recently got me arrested. I went about the child abuse and he got me arrested. I was held 11 hours in the cell. I had all my human rights violations.
We're trying to get a petition done at the moment.
He's trying to get a petition done?
Which is aiming to increase
Aren't you in the fucking government?
No. But we're trying to increase sentences for all child offenders. Yes, because that's going to
fringe meeting, top of the stairs, roommate.
Anne-Marie Waters and you are the two people who've only come down and had a full-blown conversation with me where I can stand there and I can tell you like what's going on, and you've actually got, you know, the heart and the soul, like they haven't got in there, the heart and soul to stand there.
Oh, trust he ain't got a heart or a soul.
My children's abuse. You know, I'd say if the people who are paedophiles inside that, you know, they're not human because they can't be human. They haven't got hearts and they haven't got souls. Do you know what I mean? The souls are gone.
Mate, do you know Turning Point? The organisation is very fucked up. Why? Very fucked up.
Right. So's your organisation, whatever that is.
Organisation on par.
Stay of it, you know what I mean? Why are you hiding your face and all that?
Because the police have facial recognition.
And so what? So what?
So I don't want them to know.
Yeah, why do you lie and cheat or you do crime? No, you don't. So why hide your face?
Because I don't want the police to know my identity.
Why don't you want the police to know you're dead? I put my face out here because I'm confident in my views.
Yeah, because you're a fucking Tory.
Oh, because I'm a Tory.
Yes, your views are the ones that the police uphold.
I don't really like Boris, but I will give him a little bit of credit where it's due because he has done a few things that I do like.
Like what? Sorry.
I know. I think he might be working with President Trump. I might be wrong.
Can I just ask, where did you find?
I don't know. He's kicking back at like all kinds of things. Is it when they're trying to push through on something, he's putting a stall into it, which is stalling them. Which that's what I'm seeing. He's
The Kill the Poor fringe meeting, roommates, top of the stairs, far right.
Talk about something that matters.
Excuse me, this is a democracy. On your bike.
Even looking at homeless people, we do work trying to support homeless people too, and a large amount of homeless people are
going through a bill that makes trespassing
Kill the Poor fringe meeting.
I'm not.
Well, Andy Burnham's not doing anything.
Oh yeah, Andy Burnham's a scumbag.
I think Andy Burnham's one of them.
Cunt, mate. They should hang him from up there.
Why do you guys argue so much?
Because he's a fucking scumbag. Why am I a scumbag? What do you know about me? You don't know anything about me. Look at that little lanyard.
Can we all not just get along?
That's what I said. We need to have a civil debate.
We do need to be peaceful. We need to sort the problem out with peace.
Yeah, no problem, Jack.
It was nice to talk to all of you.
Nice to talk to you, mate.
Fuck off, you scumbag.
Do you pay your extra taxes?
I'm not going to pay taxes.
Why not?
Get a job
Why
then.
would you?
Get a job then.
Well,
she could go today.
just redistribute the wealth.
Walk amongst us. Seriously, mate.
Mate, why don't you campaign for something that actually helps people?
Sorry,
like anti-racism, something.
Look, walking around like it's Halloween, what are you achieving?
I'm concealing my identity, mate. Every fucking
You're concealing your identity?
Yeah.
What from?
The police. Because I was at a protest. Would you want to fuck with the police then? I don't want the police to know who I am. So I conceal my identity.
If you don't want to know who you are, police know who you are, why are you even here?
Because I'm out protesting.
Protesting what?
The Tory party conference.
So am I!
Then why are you wearing that fucking ridiculous hat?
Why are you dressed like it's Halloween?
I just explained. I'm concealing my identity.
Anyway, enough fun. Thank you very much.
Mate, when the bill passes, they'll haul you in. And I won't even be mad. You fucking deserve it.
Throughout the pandemic, we were clapped and branded as heroes, but nothing has changed materially for care workers. In fact, things have got far worse for us. The decision of the Supreme Court on March the 19th ruling that care workers were not working whilst on sleep shifts came as a crushing blow. We were told that our labour, supporting disabled people in the community, being ready to react to crisis, being a listening ear, being a shift worker, being disciplined if we left the workplace meant nothing at all. Our labour isn't even worth minimum wage. Proof that we as care workers cannot rely on the courts to make moral decisions. We have to fight for them ourselves. Whilst I'm incredibly pro-vaccine, I actually had my booster jab on Thursday. It's really important to highlight how care workers and support workers have felt bullied by government legislation around mandatory vaccines. It's recently been reported between 40 and 70,000 workers will lose their jobs by the 16th of November with no financial remuneration. There are already over 112,000 vacancies in the sector, and this decision to pick on the most fragmented and unorganised workers will just exacerbate our already dire situation. In London, the vacancy rate stands at 9.5%. This is a rate where vital services are at risk of no longer being able to run effectively and force burnout staff into even longer hours. Retention is a massive problem in our sector. Nearly 1 in 3 workers leaving within the first year of employment. In home care, it's nearly 1 in 2. Training is abysmal and career progression is non-existent. Those who've been working in the sector for over 5 years are on average paid just 15p more an hour than new entrants do. It's reported that care workers are leaving the sector to work in Amazon because they feel the terms and conditions are better. This is the bleakness of the situation we face.
We had a banking crisis in 2007-8, and really since then we've had massive austerity across the public sector that has hit the health service incredibly hard. That we've had cuts in services which meant that they closed 17,000 beds in the last 11 years, and it's because of those closures that it means we work in a health service now where you only need a tiny crisis, so you need a bad car crash on the motorway and the whole of the health system locally goes into crisis and has no beds, and you have to move people, the ambulances, to go to other hospitals. So we were in that mess prior to where we weren't coping, and then we got COVID. So we got a whole number of people in additional, so we had crisis right across the system, and I do think a lot of that was avoidable had they chosen to put people before profit, which they didn't. They consistently put everything in late so that we got much more than we needed to, and a lot more illness and a lot more death and a lot more tragedy for families up and down the country.
We need to challenge the classist myth of unskilled work. Care is complicated, responding to crisis is difficult. We are advocates and my colleagues are skilled, and I was screaming that at Priti Patel yesterday.
Puppets, the Tories!
Community's been in this country for 500 years. They've made every attempt to try and erase us from the landscape, but we're still here, despite the best intentions of the Tory party, and we will be here in another 500 years, which is why we say, kill the bill! Kill the bill! Kill the bill! The phrase is pretty, chum, Mandy's bull, and it means pretty, kiss my ass. Pretty, chum, Mandy's bull. Pretty, chum, Mandy's bull. Pretty, chum, Mandy's bull. Pretty, chum, Mandy's bull. Pretty, chum, Mandy's bull.
It's our problem, and if we don't fucking look after each other, then I'm free speech. I'm using the English language.
It's not actually illegal to swear. It's not illegal to swear. You're allowed to swear.
I'm using the English language. I use the in my everyday language all the time.
Was that a good King's meeting?
I have to say, we have to be honest about what has been happening since last year. Last year there was a Black Lives Matter uprising. Now we know we've been affected by Everybody has. And the world was silent. Some people enjoyed it. It was quite maddening for some. And at that moment, there was a murder on camera and the whole world saw it. And because everybody was already so frustrated, that became everybody's cause. It was Black Lives Matter, and it sparked global attention and global protest. Where were the trade unions? They weren't there. The trade unions were not there. Ordinary people who had never been on protest before got on the streets and marched week after week after week. Where were the trade unions? They were not there. And I can tell you now, there's Black Lives Matter activists in this room that don't know the power of trade unions because they haven't seen it. When we've been marching, it's the truth. I have to be honest with you. They have never seen it. Since last year to this, some new activists have been taken to the streets for anything, any cause. Kill the bill. Where were the trade unions? Hardly any. We were campaigning on against the bill since last year, April. Where were the trade unions? They weren't there. I have to tell you, the protest movement has taken on this kind of organic way of protesting. There's an issue and there's a reason to go out and protest, and so we organise and we get out there. Our youth are not going to wait for trade union bureaucracy, I'm afraid. Those days are done. They're not going to wait for the old-fashioned traditions and these processes, because we know that we now have the power to mobilise and organise. The trade unions have got, I don't know why, it seems as if since last year they've been hamstrung. I mean, People's Assembly has been fantastic in getting people together, but the numbers from trade unions that we used to see on the street, as John said, have not been there. It's as if the protest movement has run away with the movement and the trade unions have fallen behind, and that has got to change.
People say striking doesn't work. Well, let me tell you, when we took those workers out and striking McDonald's, we got them the biggest wage increase they ever achieved. We also forced McDonald's to offer contracts of employment. They tell us striking doesn't work. We took 2 places out in Brighton. They gave them £1 an hour if they were working past 11 o'clock at night and brought a pay rise earlier. 2 Wetherspoons pubs did that for all of the workers in Wetherspoons. And when at the beginning of this crisis, Tim Martin said he wasn't going to pay his workers until the money from the government went in the bank. We made sure that didn't happen too. That was with 2 pubs. Now imagine if we organised all of those pubs, and we don't want you to boycott them, we want you to go in and explain to them why they need to be organised and why we all need to stand together. Because when we do that, we are unstoppable, you know.
You may think, how do you get justice for something that's 37 years old? But I tell you what, Shrewsbury did it. Shrewsbury 24 got their convictions overturned. Didn't just happen. It didn't just happen because they asked nicely. It's because they shouted, they built, and they stayed, and they resisted for even longer than that. You know, these things don't come easy, but hang on a minute, what's happening in Scotland? If you got a conviction as a miner during the miners' strike in Scotland, you now are having a chance to have that conviction overturned. They're looking at collective pardons. So if you can have it in Scotland, we can have it in England, we can have it in Wales. So build on where we succeed, because you know what, we share in the successes, we share in the fight, and as Ian said, that's when we win together.
I want to say something about illegal protests, because of the government made protesting illegal. Well, this is the position of Black Lives Matter. We're protesting against police brutality. That should be illegal. We're protesting against deaths in custody. That should be illegal. We're protesting against child abuse, police abusing our children on the street. That should be illegal. So fuck their laws. When it's time to protest, we're out on the street, and that's that solidarity.
And one of the latest and biggest lies that the Tories are doing at the moment is to claim that they are making Britain the best place in the world to work. Tell that to the 30% of workers earning less than the living wage. Tell it to the 3.6 million who are working on insecure contracts, or the 67% of workers who don't get any sick pay. Tell that to the 1 in 10 workers who are facing fire and rehire at the moment. Last week, the Tories nodded
plodded through in the direction of workers' rights and offered a miserly package of 3 new rights. I don't know whether you saw it, there wasn't much fanfare about it, and quite right too. What did they offer? First, more leave for carers, but no pay. Second, a right for workers to keep the tips that they earn. Thank you very much, Tories. And by the way, you're 5 years late on delivering on that particular promise. And third, the right to request flexible working. The right to request. I mean, you know, what are we, slaves? Talk about an Oliver Twist clause, please sir, can I have a bit more? It's an absolute outrage and a disgrace, and it's an insult to hard-working people. Comrades, the Tories need to be called out, and then they need to be kicked out, and that's what we're here for today.
You're fired, but don't worry, if you want your job back, then come in tomorrow morning, sign this new contract. We'll take 5, 10, sometimes £15,000 off your pay. We'll change your shift pattern. Any time that you thought you were going to spend with your kids, well, you can kiss goodbye to that. And often, we'll actually take away your pension rights as well. But it's a new contract, and you'll still have a job. And you're one of the lucky ones. Because we've got 40 people outside who would love to be taking your job. And that's the pressure. That's the pressure they're putting on people. How come this is legal? How come it's legal in the first place? You'd think that if you have a contract, then it cuts both ways. You have to turn up for work, you have to do the work that's in your contract, and the management has to honour their part of the contract. So how come they manage to get round it? And that's what most people, when they first hear about fire and rehire, they just don't understand. They say, well, that can't be right. But it's certainly not right, but it is the law. In the law at the moment, you can dismiss somebody from their employment for a number of reasons. You can dismiss them because they're incompetent. You can dismiss them for gross misconduct. You can dismiss them for incapacity if somebody's long-term sick. But the other reason that you can get fired or you can get dismissed is called some other substantial reason. That's it. That's what it's defined as. And what it means is that if your employer fires you because they say, well, we want to reduce our costs, then you try and take them to an industrial tribunal and they will plead some other substantial reason. And you'll say, well, what's that? And they'll say, oh, well, we had to do it to maintain competitiveness. We needed to cut our costs. What the tribunal doesn't do in that situation is it doesn't look at whether you really did need to reduce wages in order to maintain competitiveness. They don't look and find out what your financial situation is to find out whether what you're saying is true or not, because they say that would be for us as the tribunal to stand in the place of the employer and to be managing the business, and we don't want to do that, so they let it pass. They say, if it's true, is it a substantial reason? And of course they then say, well, yes, it is. If you need to do it for competitiveness, that's a substantial reason. So it then becomes legal to fire somebody in that situation if they refuse to accept that lower contract. And the really wicked thing about this is that when they fire you, you might have worked at that company for 20 years, and they might be taking £10,000 off your annual salary, but what rights have you got? Well, you've worked there for 20 years, of course you've got your 20 years of redundancy payments, haven't you? No, you haven't. You haven't got your redundancy payment, and the reason you haven't got your redundancy payment is because you've not been made redundant. You've been fired. They'll say, look, the job is still there. You make a position redundant, not a person. We're the one who's saying you're not prepared to do the job on this new basis. So you're dismissed, you're fired. And the 20 years you've spent loyally working for that company, thinking that if ever you were to be made redundant, you'd get redundancy payments. No, you don't. That is why this is so appalling.
I've got a little confession to make with you before we start. My union, they got a stall in Tory Party conference and I've been inside. And I want to give you a little bit of feedback. They're very well organised, actually. I've been sneaking into the back of their fringe meetings, listening to what they got to say, and from an educational perspective, it's quite good. Labour Party are talking about strengthening Ofsted. I've been in a Conservative Party fringe meeting, sat at the back quietly, hoping I'm not being noticed, and they're talking about binning GCSEs. Well, that's good for our union. I'm really worried that we could be in a situation where Conservative Party are moving to the left of Starmer's Labour on some key issues. But one thing they are not doing is they're not infighting. They're talking about retaining the Red Wall. I went to Labour Party conference and I didn't see nothing like that. I didn't see that level of organisation. But what they are also doing is they're attacking the left. They've decided to go on this internal war against us, and Jeremy Corbyn has been central to that. So we all need to stand in solidarity with Jeremy. But that's enough from me. I'm going to welcome on our guest. So I would like to first introduce Gary Young, Professor at Manchester University. You know him. He is a great man, a great journalist who has been on our side consistently. So welcome, Gary. And now the man who does not need any introduction, Jeremy Corbyn.
It was straight after the election, two things happened. One was I said in my acceptance speech that the first thing I was going to do as leader of the party was to go outside and speak at the Refugees Are Welcome rally that was being held in Parliament Square. And they were pretty shocked and pretty horrified by this and said, this isn't what party leaders ought to do. And I said, well, get used to it because that's the way it's going to be. I've never forgotten a lady in Newcastle saying to me, I asked her why she'd come to an event we were at because she didn't seem particularly a Labour person, and she said, well, I heard you were evil. And I said, okay, and what's the verdict? She said, I don't think you are. So I put that down as a result. Thank you, Daily Mail, for that one. I was being privately advised by an awful lot of people who one would loosely call on the right of the Labour Party that this whole thing is useless. All you're doing is attracting the faithful. You're not winning anybody over. Well, we can relive that campaign forever, but we threw everything at it and we got the highest Labour vote almost of this century, so I'm proud of that. A number of points during the 2017 election campaign that to me were crucial. One was the launch, two was the mood that we managed to generate, and the manifesto launch, obviously. The third is what happened here in Manchester. It was awful, the bomb. People died. It was wrong in every conceivable way what happened. And I was here in Manchester straight away. But I also said, and I'd made a speech about this the following week, that we had to reflect on our activities as a country in the war on terror and what we've been doing around the world. And so we thought about that a great deal, particularly Seamus Milne and myself and others, thought about it a great deal and decided that at the end of the campaign suspension, that was on 5 days later, 4 or 5 days later, I would make this reflective speech on our foreign policy and why I would not lead a government that would go into illegal wars and would have a very different foreign policy. If we rely on the, use the word very loosely, moderation of the mainstream media to decide what our message should be, then we're not going to get that message through. You look at Google, Amazon, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, etc., etc. In reality, they're owned by two groups, and they're very, very powerful. And they do and will and can shut down people that are difficult. They shut down the Indian farmers at an absolutely crucial point in their demonstration in New Delhi when they were trying to force back against essentially free market agricultural policy which the Narendra Modi's government is trying to force on them. So they had no form of communication. So what did they do? They invented a newspaper. They printed a newspaper of their own. But quite clearly you can only get a newspaper out amongst the 100,000 people that are there. You couldn't get it out all over India. And so the power is absolutely massive. They close down or limit or control or put in algorithms to control and direct people in every country and every society, and they will go along with repressive regimes, they'll go along with anybody in order to fit in. It's very, very powerful. 5 years of media attacks taught me they're very effective, they're very powerful, and they're totally relentless. It's very hard to believe how stupid some of the stories are. I didn't know that my great-great-uncle, 3 removed through his second cousin, married to somebody else, apparently, but the name isn't known, ran a workhouse in Gloucester. I know you're here because you're activists and because you do good things and good stuff, I'm assuming. You know as well as I do that if you're with people in their community on the good days and the bad days, the days you don't win the struggle to keep the school, keep the hospital, keep the A&E, if you're there on those days and you're there on the days that you win, when you save the A&E, you develop a new park, you develop a new nursery, or whatever your campaign is, you're politically earning the space to talk about wider and bigger issues. If you're not there and you only turn up well-dressed and well-suited 3 weeks before an election, it's not the same. It is about mobilising people. The right rely on ignorance, inaction and apathy. We rely on information, enthusiasm and activism.
Without further ado, let's go through some of our panel. Maxine Peake, Emma Jones from Hacktoft. From We Own It, we have John Bosco. Gary Young. And the one and only Jeremy Corbyn.
The press will tell you that they're less powerful today. That's not true. Actually, more people now read newspapers than ever before. They just mostly read them online. News publishers reach 3 in 4 adults every single week, and the same old people are in charge, and the same old people are setting the same agenda. Almost every other similar industry is regulated. Even broadcast media is regulated. But the newspapers, they think that they're above regulation. The billionaire owners shouldn't be able to get away with publishing falsehoods on climate change, it being an exaggerated hoax if they believe it to be, or disgusting views about women and minority groups which have absolutely no substance. Last year, Hacktoft found that 50 articles about in the press were false and misleading. We work with scientists and environmental experts, and we found dozens more inaccurate articles about climate change. In summary, the critical things that we can do to fix our broken media are greater plurality and newsroom diversity, independent regulator for the largest newspapers, and Leveson Part 2. That's how we can make a change, and that's how we can bring about the kind of media that this country actually deserves.
We have to stop the Tory takeover of the BBC. There's still some great initiatives from the BBC. They still do encourage young writers, young actors in small ways. And if we lose that, then where else is going to do that? Nobody takes risks anymore. The BBC should not work on viewing figures. It's a service. It should be a public service for us all. It shouldn't matter how many people watch it. There should be something for everybody.
Broadly speaking, our media terrain is incredibly white male, and I think somebody called it pale male and stale. Yeah, man, thank you very much. It is very much that, and whenever we gather in meetings like this, I think we spend a lot of time talking about what's wrong with the media. I mean, I think we all agree on what's wrong with the media. It's become the mouthpiece of those in power.
The first by-election that was fought while Jeremy was leader, which I think was in Oldham, it was said in my company at a meeting, in my personal company, not in my actual company, I don't have one of those, if he loses, it's curtains for Corbyn. Actually, if the vote goes down, it's curtains for Corbyn. And I said, what if the vote goes up? And they said, well, nobody is saying that. And I said, well, I just said it. What if the vote goes up? It hasn't happened yet. This was dismissed. And then the by-election happened. And the Mirror, in its first edition, before the vote had been counted, said a night of woe for Jeremy Corbyn. And then the votes came in, and the vote share had gone up. The majority had gone up. And then they said, well, he's a good local candidate. That's why. It's got nothing to do with Jeremy Corbyn. And I said, so Jeremy Corbyn is a witch from the 18th century. And if he drowns, he's not a witch. And if he floats, then he's a witch. And we burn him anyway. There is no way for this person to win in the framework that you have set out. He will always be bad.
When the massive flood happened between Zambia, Zimbabwe and Mozambique, and it was 3 or 4 weeks before some communities were even reached with any kind of help or assistance. Where was our media in reporting that? In fact, most people didn't even know there was a flood in Mozambique at that time. And it's that sort of global news value that we have to look at. That's why, through the Project for Justice and Peace, we've been setting up news clubs around the country. And I've been to quite a few of the inaugural meetings of this. Thomas Barlow, who's been inspiring them and setting them up, is here tonight. And it's fascinating. You bring a group of people together in their community, discuss independent media, discuss what's happening on the news, discuss how to challenge it, and discuss how to mobilise people through these news clubs. And we're setting these up on a bigger basis all over the country, because I think it's bringing people together to empower them of what an alternative media can look like. Empower them where there are strong independent papers. I'm thinking of papers like the West Highland Free Press, like papers in Bristol, like the Camden New Journal, and a number of others around the country that have been very effective as genuinely independent local newspapers. Whilst at the same time, most other local newspapers have been bought over by major corporations who actually control them, asset strip them, get rid of most of the journalists, print press releases and advertising, and very little else. It's the destruction of local media. You think about it, local media, local news, local reporting, local Facebook, etc. groups are actually very important as a glue of community. I'm speaking here to somebody who gets constantly irritated beyond belief and annoyed beyond belief with the BBC. And the thing I find most lovely and endearing about the BBC is when the news comes on, the news presenter decides the most important person to interview about a news story that's there is the BBC expert on that subject, and then to add to the flavour of it, the BBC expert on the subject then brings in a BBC reporter to give us the flavour of the events going on the ground. At no point does any member of the public get involved at all. It is solely a BBC thing, and the BBC loves nothing more than history programmes about the history of the BBC. But, and I say this as a big but, it is a public service broadcast. It is supposed to educate and entertain and inform. That is what the Charter said. There's never been a more politically directed and motivated government. Cameron, May and Johnson, far more so than even Thatcher or previous Tory Prime Minister, in controlling, influencing and trying to push the BBC in a particular direction. And so I work with the NUJ and others in trying to make sure we do have a genuine public service broadcasting. Because if we lose it in the way the US lost public service broadcasting, and essentially the basis of news in the USA is Fox News and the values that go with Fox News, that is where we're heading. So it's up to us to defend those bits we've got that are genuinely independent, but above all, to promote an independent media and provide platforms for each other.
Huge thank you to Maxine, to John Bosco, to Gary, to Emma, and to Jeremy Corbyn. So thank you all.
As the maid breadwinners as well when it comes to work. And if this Tory government get away with slashing our public services, it will be women who will be expected to pick up all of the caring responsibilities that flow from this. The only reason we have public services is because people fought for them, and that includes women. And if we're to keep our services, women will have to fight again to do so.
We see a lot of this in the press at the moment. Everyone's talking about if there's one bad apple in the piece, we need to root out all of these bad apples, and I'll quite openly say it's not the apples, it's the orchid. There's a culture in policing which is a very toxic, masculine culture. It's a culture where officers will know that there are officers within the ranks who should not be working there, dangerous officers who given the chance will abuse women and who will abuse their role. Senior officers know this and they will just move them around the force.
If our men don't stand up, we're tired of begging you guys to actually fix up. This is not all men bullshit that you guys keep trying to create a freaking campaign when we come up with our campaign. Let's be honest, we are proud to be fucking women. And that's another thing. I want people to be proud to be women. Be proud of feminine energy. We want an equal world, but at the same time we can celebrate the fact that we are who we are. And I'm gonna say this, please. The Twitter people, the Instagram people, I'm already your villain, don't worry, pick your best character. I live up to be the bad guy. I want to be the baddest bad guy I can be, because you have to be a villain in someone else's story. So I'm going to say this, if you're a woman, if you're born a woman, big up to you. The reason being is that we can't even say that no more. And this is something that we should be able to celebrate. Big up to you. Big up to the fact that you're taking spaces of who you are in a system that will always tell you that you're not good enough. Big up to you that you turn up every day, not expecting anyone to celebrate you, and still use your voice in places that they are not even recording what you're saying. Big up to the fact that you choose to still stand in who you are, knowing that your beauty, your standards are told on a regular basis that you're meant to fit and take the box for someone else. We keep breaking ceilings and breaking all this stuff, but yet they are not allowing us through the doors.
We've been talking about Sarah Everard and that case, and of course, you know, I stand here as a woman and my heart goes out to the family. May she rest in peace. What happened to her was absolutely, it was just horrific, and it was done by a police officer, which is even more horrific. But I can't sit here and just talk about, you know, Sarah Everard. Look how many black women have died at the hands of the police, and we don't get the same notoriety. In fact, we barely get any. We barely get any. So I'm not going to sit here and just talk about Sarah Everard when our black sisters have died in numbers, murdered by the police. And in a feminist movement, and I'm very reluctant to use that word, and I'll be quite honest with you, I'm very reluctant to use that word because it seems very middle class and white to me. I don't think that I have a position in this feminist movement because they're all very well to do. Some of these women have done very, very well for themselves and they call themselves feminists. Well, black people aren't here to prop up a feminist movement that's led by white middle class women. We need to be propped up because we face more hardship than they have in society.
So we're in Manchester, city of the suffragettes, and there's a park called Alexandra Park not far from the centre where at the start of last century when women were fighting for the vote there was a glass cactus house until suffragettes put a bomb in it and blew it up. And we're also not far from the City Art Gallery where feminists went in and smashed up the pictures. So this is our city, Manchester, suffragette city.
Whose lives matter? Whose lives matter? Whose lives matter? Say it loud, say it clear. Refugees are welcome here. Shout up, boys, shout up. Tories out. If we love against Tories out. Refugees in. Tories out. Refugees in. Whose lives matter? Black lives matter. Whose lives matter? Black lives matter.
We started Drive to Survive about 3 months ago because we read Section 4 of the police bill, which essentially attempts to remove gypsy and traveller nomadic culture from the British Isles. It is that stark. It does it in 3 ways. It does it by a potential £2,500 fine for anybody who's nomadic, it's the impounding of their homes if they're nomadic, imprisonment, and potentially if obviously the parents are in prison, the children will go into care. Now this chimes with a very dark part of European history. In 1936, the Nazi Party passed a decree that made it illegal for Romani people to travel. And it's a direct parallel with that. History doesn't always repeat itself, but it is beginning to rhyme. Kill the bill! Kill the bill!
As a black community, this Tory government have brought in so much legislation to silence our voices. They've brought in the Chiz Act to infiltrate our movements with not only these police officers you see here, but undercover police officers who are probably standing with us right now. They've brought in the PCSC bill, which Boris Johnson tells me is an act of love. Taking us back to the 1980s is an act of love towards the black community, giving the police the power to stop and search us without suspicion or belief. This government would drag us back to a police state. When I say Tories, you say out! Tories out! Tories out!
I'm proud to stand here
here as a Jewish person as well, because people will know that there are a large series of Jewish communities in Manchester, not just one community. We actually do disagree with each other at times. I'm actually part of Jewish Voice for Labour. We have stood in solidarity with our Palestinian brothers and sisters in their demand for liberation and for freedom in Palestine, and to fight against the Israeli apartheid system. And for doing that, we are being threatened. Some of us are being expelled from the Labour Party in the name of fighting anti-Semitism. Now, I want to send a message. That's divide and rule as well, just as has been going on in the conference behind us.
Are you stay away from it? I'd like to know why you defend the force that had misogynist and racist. What are you doing about the police? What do you think is that? The police officers are like, as I'm talking to you, these police officers are black facts. Come on, Joe, let's talk to the black people. Why can't you talk? You just talk to the black people.
I'd love to talk to you, but I've got an event to go to.
No, you can go to yours. What are we doing?
Jacob, I lived outside Boris Johnson's house for on planes.
You're taking our £20 off us, no minute. Give them £20. You won't take £20.
Right, guys,
bioweapons, and the police need to step up soon. He's a Jacob, you know it. I actually like it. I like
it. I believe in freedom of speech and freedom of protest. It's a historic right in this country. But also there's a freedom to get to one's events and appointments. Excellent. Pretty is a marvellous Home Secretary.
Are we going to give up our civil liberties? I can tell you in hundreds of years, our forefathers, the civil rights movement, people lost their lives. People gave up their lives. People gave up their livelihoods for us to be able to be on the streets and protest. People gave up their lives for us to have the rights that we have now. And so now is the time that we have to make a decision collectively. How are we going to respond to this bill? And there's only one way. Unless we're going to just accept it, unless we're going to accept that we no longer are able to protest in the way we have been doing for centuries, unless we're just going to give that all up, then the only other option is we now have to make this bill completely ungovernable. That means we send a message to Priti Patel and the police and the government that we are going to continue to protest. We have no choice.
I think as Priti has come into my city, I am extremely angry that they come here every year. Like, it's, you know, get out and don't come back. There's a choice behind the decision to host this conference here in our city, and it is a challenge against the resistance that Manchester holds as a city.
Let's start with Priti Patel. From my viewpoint, what the Tory party have done is they realised that if they want to sell a shit policy to us, then somehow it becomes more palatable if they find someone black or Asian to try and sell it to us. Rishi Sunak, that idiot Zahawi, who's our COVID minister, God help us all, 130,000 excess deaths, and he doesn't seem to think he's doing anything wrong. All these people have been put in those positions, and because I'll tell you one simple reason: they care more about their class than they do about their race. That's it, simple as.
Closing thought I'd like to leave you with is that, you know, since when has the law ever been right? One thing people forget is that the people who hid Anne Frank were breaking the law, and the people who sent her to Auschwitz were following it. So given that the law is often wrong, and given that it's often enforced by people who are deeply wrong for deeply wrong reasons, when the police bill becomes law, we have to hold on with pride to the idea that when freedom is outlawed, only outlaws can be free.
Can
ask you to raise a hand if you've heard of Len Johnson? Thought you guys might, but we did Sale Grammar School earlier today and one hand went up in year 8. So it's an important story, an important time to tell this story during Black History Month, and we are delighted to be here. So hopefully, if you know about Len, brilliant, we're going to celebrate his life, we're going to celebrate his legacy today. If you don't know about him, you're going to find out a little bit about him.
This project is not only about telling the Len Johnson story, it's far more than that. I'm mixed race, just like Len Johnson. I'm West African, just like Len Johnson. I'm Mancunian, just like Len Johnson. And I've grown up in boxing gyms since I was 8 years old. So why has it taken me 24 years to hear about this unbelievable story? There's a reason this has been kept from us, and it's very purposeful. History has been whitewashed, and it's time to change that. You need to understand that you come from greatness, and that black history doesn't just start and end at the slave trade, which is all we're taught about in school. History is taught by the oppressor, not the oppressed. Len Johnson was a fighter in and out of the ring. He achieved so much in his time and faced many obstacles because of his skin colour. He wasn't allowed to become the British champion because of the written laws that were in place to prevent him from doing so. Britain has a great habit of ignoring their shameful past instead of talking about it and being transparent and moving forward. They would much rather pretend it never happened. It's very clear we need this to be a long-term project and not something just for Black History Month. We need to commit to telling this story all year round. I'm very happy that thousands of children across the city have now seen this play and Len Johnson's now on their minds. But we have a long way to go. I can promise you this, within the next 5 years, Len Johnson will be a household name. I hope you enjoy the show.
Let me tell you about the King Len Johnson. It was harder than you, me, him, her, them, Johnson. He was born in a place called Clayton, in England near Boston. Rule 24 didn't take his scheme under consideration. Government fact, both your parents had to be white. He had about 135 too. He fought for his people's rights and jobs like his father fought.
All lives matter. You ask me, your side's racist, not mine.
Hey, look, I never said it was racist. Guilty conscience. Come on, do one. You're only here to wind us up.
You lot will have to deal with it, won't you?
I won't deal with it by giving you a right up to the jaw.
So, get off me! Help! Help!
Okay. You believe that? Racist prick.
Yeah, where's punching him to get here?
It'll make me feel better.
Len Johnson, the boxer?
Never heard of him.
You're a boxer from Clayton who trains in offside and you don't know who Len Johnson is.
Well, who is it? Tell me then.
Len Johnson was a boxer, like you, from Clayton, like you. And like you, he had to learn there were
Many ways to win a fight, both in the ring and outside of it. Yeah, get that bit.
His early record was strong, and by 1925, he'd earned a fight which should have made him the natural contender for the UK title. But there was a problem with that.
Alright. Just take a minute. You need a rest. You need some water. You need air. You need to save your strength for tomorrow.
What I need is a new trainer, one that's not so old and slow. No. I'm going to beat him tomorrow. I can feel it.
What happens after you beat Ted Kid Lewis? Eh? He's a former champ. Makes you natural challenger, but you can't fight for the title, so who's left to fight?
You know the bank down on Market Street? I was there yesterday. Do you know what I saw? I saw a black man behind the counter taking care of white people's money. That's progress, Will. It's 1925, times are changing.
Aye, but not fast enough.
Rule 24, according to the British Boxing Board of Control, stated that anyone who wanted to challenge for a championship belt must have been born to 2 white parents. Whether Len beat Ted Lewis or not, owing to the colour of his skin, according to the law, he wouldn't be allowed to challenge for the title.
And the winner by 9th round stoppage, Len Johnson!
Well, Manchester is a very strange place for a Conservative Party conference. It's not a Conservative city, but, you know, they oscillate from one place to another, as you know. I'm up here as part of Let the UK Live, lettheuklive.com, and we're building a united campaign across the country covering all political spectrum, a united front against all the lockdowns, COVID restrictions, and program. So we don't mind what political party people are in, as long as they're prepared to debate. Resist, defy, do not comply. resist, defy, do not comply.